Hi, I'm Jenny. This is my channel, Designs with Paper. Thanks for stopping by. If you are a card maker, you know that there are many trends that come and go through our industry. One of my favorite trends is pop-up cards. I love making the cards that are interactive, especially when I'm creating cards for children. The only problem I have personally with the pop-up cards in an A2 size is that it's really hard to fit a regular stamp size image into these pop-up cards. Often the images are created to be the focal point on a 4¼ by 5½ inch card. So when you are dealing with a pop-up card or a box card, there's not a lot of real estate available for those larger images. This past year, one trend that has been super popular are slimline cards. Now, slimline cards are those cards that fit into a business size envelope, a number 9 envelope. And I had a thought, could I make a pop-up box card that fit inside a business size envelope, a number 9 envelope? So with a little bit of, a lot of of scrap cardstock and measuring and cutting, I figured out a way to take a few pieces of cardstock and make a box card or a pop-up box card that would fit into a slimline envelope. So stick around, watch the video, and let me know what you think. A2 size box card or slimline box card. Thanks for watching. All of the images for this card have already been stamped, colored, and cut out, but the stamp sets I used are this Gnome School stamp set and the Sprinkle Some Happiness stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. I used all of the gnomes in the first set along with the little Gnome School and some of the accessories in the second set. I have this Sunny Studios Seasonal Trees stamp set. I used a couple of those trees and some accessories. I also have this Fiskars grass punch, super old school. And then to have some variation in my grass, I used a set of Lawn Fawn dies, Meadow Borders, I think is what it's called. So like I said, this card is going to fit into this business size envelope. And here's my prototype that I used some scrap cardstock to create. The first piece is the back, and it is 5½ inches across and 3½ inches down from top to bottom. The next two pieces are the sides, and they are all each 3¼ inch across from side to side and 3½ inches from top to bottom. The next four pieces are the pieces that make up the inserts to the card, the place where the images will be attached. And they are all 5½ inches wide from side to side. And then they vary in height so that I had a little bit of a better view, from 3 inches down to 1.5 inches. So I've slowed this piece down so that you can see what I'm doing here. I edited a ton of footage out of this because it was just going to be a really long video. So on both of the side pieces, I put them in my scoreboard with the 3½ inch, the 3¼ inch side up at the top, and I scored one end of each piece of paper. Now you saw me just flip that over. I was not supposed to rotate that. I was only supposed to score one end. And on the other one, I did only score one end. I actually went back and recut this piece of paper because I only need a fold line on one side. Also, on the inserts, I scored both ends of each of those inserts. Now, on the sides, I put score tape on one, on the little flap that was created when I scored it, and on the inserts, I put score tape on both sides. So here are all the images I have. I had cut those little clouds, but I did not end up using them. Here are my grass pieces that I cut with the die and the punch. This is the Gnome School and the trees and all of the gnomes that I will be using for this stamp. And then on that cute little pineapple tray, you'll see all of the accessories from the various stamp sets that I chose to use. So this piece of paper, it's a blue piece of paper that measures 5½ inches across and 3½ inches from top to bottom. And I'm going to attach the sides to that blue piece. I've also taken a blender brush and some blue ink to kind of add a little texture to that blue piece. Now I'm taking this score tape and I'm putting it on the back side of my blue piece of cardstock and kind of burnishing that tape on so that it's nice and stuck. And I will do that to both sides. You can see here that I only needed to score it on one end and put the tape on that one end. I got a little carried away in that at the beginning. So I've got the back attached to these sides, but then from the back you can see that seam. And that's where that gray piece that is 5.5 by 3.5 inches comes into place. It's to cover up those little, the seam. So because this is not a moving part, I'm going to adhere it just with my ATG gun. It's a pretty strong adhesive when we're not talking about moving pieces. So I put a piece of tape along each side, and then I added a couple pieces in the middle just to be safe. And I'm gluing this or taping this to the back of the card. And this is I can't even speak tonight. This will be where you write your little note. Right there on the back of the card. Right, so now we need to put the inserts in. And you can see I have all 4 inserts there, and they're going to go into the middle of this card. I'm going to start with the one that is 5.5 inches wide from side to side and 3 inches from top to bottom. And I peeled off one piece of score tape, and I'm going to lay it right there along the fold line and even up the bottom and fold that side over to adhere it. I'm going to rub it down real good. I'm going to take my bone folder and burnish it on both the inside and then crease that fold really good. And I do that with all 4 of the pieces. And presto, YouTube magic, right? So now we have all 4 levels of our card in middle attached on one side. And the next step is going to be to attach the grass. Now I have different sizes of paper. I just use scraps out of my pile to cut this out. And this tall one, I need it to not be taller, not to stick out higher than the front of that card. So if I have to put it down here on the shortest piece, the piece that's only like 1.5 inches tall, I can always cut the bottom off. And that's what I end up having to do to keep the grass from sticking out the top of the card. Otherwise, it's just going to get bent or ripped off in the envelope. So here I'm adding some ATG tape, and I'm going to line up that grass. And I want to keep the little grassy pieces. And I have taken my blender brush and some ink and added a little bit of shading or extra color to all of that ink. And I'm going to line that up with the side of that gray piece, and it is going to be longer than that flap. So once I get it adhered, I will just fold that little end piece back and trim the grass off the side and off the bottom. And I did that with all 4 pieces. Now you can see that that second one needs a little bit of help. It just was kind of wonky, so I had to kind of take it out and adjust it and do a little bit of magic. Now I have taken the tape off of all 4 inserts and attached it to the other side the same way I did the first side of the card. And there you go. It's going to fit inside that envelope. Now comes the decorating part. The biggest image in this card is that Gnome School stamp. So I've got from this Simon Says Gnome School stamp set. So I've got to figure out where I can put this on the card without it hanging out of the top. It cannot be any taller than that back piece. And because this is on a moving part, I am going to use that really strong score tape because I can only use a little bit of adhesive. I don't have a lot of, if I put too much adhesive on, the card will stick shut. So here I'm just going to fidget with it, and it's kind of off camera. I'm so sorry. I should have zoomed back out a little bit. I'm going to figure out where I can put it that it will not hang out taller than the top of that card, the grass in the back. Peel off the paper on the back of that tape and just stick it down. And I'm going to hold it there for a second and make sure it's not too tall. And pull out the envelope and double check to make sure that I'm good to go. And then I'll
burnish that tape down really good. Once I know that it's going to fit, I'll burnish that down. So here's all these extra pieces that I need to put into this card. And I don't know if you're even going to be able to see this, but again, I've got to make sure those trees don't stick out taller than the back of the card. So I'm going to put a little bit of score tape on the trunk of that tree, and it's just sticking to my fingers. I could not hardly even get it off the roll. And I'm using my 1/8 inch wide on this tree because that trunk is super skinny, and I don't want the adhesive to stick out because then I'll glue my card shut when I fold it down to stick it in that envelope. All right, so here you can see I've got all of the pieces in the card, and it lays flat, and the tree and the gnome school are shorter than the envelope. I think actually that tree is a little bit tall, and I think at the end I ended up taking that off and moving it down just a little bit. But now I have this front plane of the card, and this is where I'm going to put my sentiment. So I've pulled out this Fisker's punch again, and I'm going to punch another piece of scrap paper, and it's the same color as the grass there in the front. And this is super old school, and I don't know if you guys know how to have ever used these punches, but these Fisker's ones are super cool because they have that design on the front where you can line it up and it just lines up perfectly. So now I have a little strip for my sentiment here. And I went back to that Gnome School stamp set, and it has a couple of really cool sentiments in it. And I chose the thank you stamp sentiment and the teacher word. I thought this would be a really cool card to send to a teacher, especially like my kids are all 100% virtual learning right now. For about one grading period, the high school kids went back to school for a couple, like 9 weeks. And then after Christmas break, we just did not go back to in-person learning yet. Crossing fingers. My elementary kids stayed virtual. They decided they wanted to not go back to school. They really liked the teachers they had. And anyway, so here we are. We're going to line up that stamp on that in my Misty here. And I'm going to ink it up with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, I think is the ink I used. Yep, see, there we go. Simon Says Stamp. And I'm using my Misty because I haven't used these stamps before, and I might have to stamp them twice to get them nice and clean and bold. A lot of times with new stamps, there is residue from the manufacturing process on them. So here we go. We've got this sentiment strip right here along the front of the stamp, along the front of the card, and my snail is a little too far down. So I'm going to pull him off. I am going to adhere this piece of grass with the sentiment on it, and then I'll slide the snail back in. I want to make sure we can see him because he's kind of cute. I do not like snails in real life, but that snail I like. So here we've got this piece of grass, and it's all tucked in there nice and fine. I will have to trim off the end a little bit, and then we can slide that little snail dude right back in there in the grass. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this or not, but that gnome in the background by the tree, he's full on got sunglasses on. I think he might be my favorite. I would have gotten in so much trouble if I tried wearing sunglasses in class, but whatever, he's still my favorite. So there we go. And it folds flat to go into an envelope, and then it pops up, and it stands up so people can see it. Now, having made this one time, there's a couple things I would do different. The blue background, you can't really see very well because I stuck that back layer really close to it. And then there's a huge gap between the front two layers. So I would have spaced those out a little bit better and maybe not even have used that fourth back flap, because then I could have put the clouds on that blue layer in the back. Another thing I think I might do differently next time is this back piece to write your sentiment. I would actually make that a little card so that you can write something personal to somebody and then have a flap to close shut so that your message is. So there we have it, a slimline pop-up box card. Let me know what you think. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you want me to try it again? Everybody who comments and tells me how they feel about this card between now and February 1st, 2021 will be entered into a drawing to win this card. I will even change the sentiment on it for you if you're not needing a thank you teacher card. Thanks so much. See you next time.